So welcome everybody, and thank you to Shane and Suzanne for that lovely intro. I'm John, the Developer Engagement Manager at Zeit. I've also have a YouTube channel. This is where my journey with web scraping started about 6 years or so ago. And I'm very pleased to be able to say that I was part, in some way, of the Zeit team that was responsible for building the web scraping extension that Suzanne mentioned. My part was much smaller. I was helping with testing and ideation, so I can't claim any of the development for it, which is probably a good thing. But in this talk, I want to explain to you a few things about why we decided to do what we did, what we've done, and why we think it's important. So we are talking about Web Scraping Copilot, which is our VS Code extension. It's on the VS Code marketplace. You can find it now. You can download it and try it. It is free, and is not tied to our product in any way, although it does work with our product extremely well, obviously. So for me and for us, we were thinking, what is the real bottleneck that we find when we were trying to use AI to help us build Scrapy projects and spiders? And for me, it kind of came down to sort of this sentiment. We all know that extracting the data from the pages is the toughest part, and we know that all that involves. But the time-wasting parts I found were trying to parse out that raw data that you get. Now, in many cases, that's HTML, whether it's plain HTML or if it's come from a rendered browser request or something similar, and being able to take the time and look through the HTML and parse it all out was very time-consuming, brittle, and required a lot of manual stuff going on. So there we are. Manual parsing was the main thing. The friction of testing, so having to write tests for your selectors to make sure that what you're doing and what you're extracting is actually representative of the data that you want, and then maintaining that going forward. We all know that websites change a lot. Things change, things happen, so being able to keep on top of that maintenance is a big task in itself. So I've got just an example here. We all know how difficult it is to look through a load of HTML and do the inspect and all that sort of stuff to find the right selectors, make sure everything's right. So our solution to this was quite simple. We knew that AI was coming along. We knew it was going to be able to do this, but we know from our experiences that it wasn't that good at doing it. It didn't quite get there. It iterated too much, and it made essentially a mess all the time. So what we did is we built our instructions from our knowledge of web scraping into the Copilot extension in VS Code. We give it very specific instructions. We give it very clear and precise things that it will and will not do. We also have specific tools that come with an MCP server, which is run locally, comes with the extension. No information gets sent back to us. It's all run locally for you there. Writing tests, this is obviously very important. If you don't write tests as a developer, then you're either flying by the seat of your pants or you're very brave. So to get tests up and working with what we do, we use an extension for Scrapy called Scrapy Poet. And this is something that we wrote a while ago based on WebPoet, which essentially splits out your parsing code and logic from your extraction logic within Scrapy. It's a very simple premise, not as widely adopted as we would have initially thought, but it's very, very useful. But by having this approach of splitting out the parsing logic from the extraction logic, it means we have more scope and more ability to write test fixtures against it using PyTest. And because it's split out in such a way, that means that it's much easier and much more simple for the AI to look through and decipher. So it will create tests automatically for you. When we run the extension, which I'll show you in just a minute, it will generate the fixtures, generate the tests, and it has a nice interface and will show you. And it's all laid out for you, so you can test against your selectors versus your expected output. Maintenance I touched on as well, having to go back over and figure things out and change selectors where things change or add in extra fields, again becomes much more easy when you split out that parsing logic and you have the AI that can back you up. And there's just a sample of the test running here. Automates it all for you. The testing is built into its instructions, so at the end of every creation of a page object and parsing code, you end up with an output file which holds the data that you're expecting. which you can amend if you need to, passing logic in your page object, and then the test done for you, which the AI will run the command for you at the end. So I'm now going to swap over to my code editor, and I'm going to show you what I've got here. So this is our extension. Let me just double check my project is all good here. Yep. So what I'm doing is I'm starting from a base spider, very simple. This is laid out using Scrapy Poet in such a way that this spider could be run for multiple websites, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Pretty straightforward, it's very simple. It's a demo site that I use for my examples. In the settings, I have my Scrapy Poet add-on, and then I have the requirements here. It's also the Zeit API here if you needed it. But when we have our Scrapy project created and set up, we have this extension button. I'll make this a little bit bigger here. And what this does is it's going to give us a few extra things down the side. One that we added in for beta, which we didn't have in for alpha, just for quality of life, is an extension status. And this is going to check through and make sure that you have everything installed that you need to be able to do this. We found initially that it was a little bit more difficult to know if you were new, whether you were ready to go. So we've added this in, and you can review the setup steps. And this will trigger the Copilot agent to run the setup MCP tool to make sure everything's ready. As we can see, it is, and mine's all good. We'll also have set up Zeit API if you wanted to use that. This will just run through the same sort of thing and make sure that your Zeit API is set up and needed. You have a spider pane here, which will take you to your spider that you created, and you can also run it through here with any arguments that you need, should you wish to do that rather than going through the terminal. And the page objects. So this is my simple spider setup. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to come out of this, come out of here, and we're going to start typing in here. So through the sidebar of the extension I just showed you, you can click the buttons and it will trigger an automatic request into the agent panel. I prefer to do it manually. I've done through this quite a lot of times, obviously being involved in the testing, so I'm going to show you how I do it. It's important, though, if we're doing it manually, we need to change it to this web scraping agent style here, rather than the original agent. This just means that it's going to take on board all the instructions that we have written out for it, so it's going to know exactly what to do. We do have some other setup that is recommended, so should you want to give this a go, and I highly recommend that you do, maybe later today or when you get home, make sure you follow our documentation, which is linked, because it recommends there's a few agent changes that you might need to do. I'm just going to talk about models really quickly before I start this. This is going to be using the standard GitHub Copilot subscription. I think it's a $10 one or whatever it is. But I am going to be using a premium model through that. We recommend GPT-5 Mini, which is one of the free ones at the very least. Well, I've had best results from my experience and my testing using Gemini 2.5 Pro. But it's worth noting that we do rely on these models to do the generation and everything like that. So obviously, the better the model you use, the quicker and the better results are going to be. So I'm going to start working here. Oh, I just need to show you the schema we're working with first, so there's some context here. I've set up 2 items. You can obviously get the agent to set these up for you if you want to. I prefer to do that myself, so I'm in control. I know exactly what information I'm going to try and get. So these are the 2 items that I'm going to be referencing from this pane over here. So let's start. I'm going to say, create a page object using the product item. So I want to reference the actual detail page with the sample URL. I'm going to go and get my sample URL because it needs to know it will have a page to download that it can actually work with. I'm going to grab this. And we'll come back over here. I'm going to paste this in. When you're doing detail pages or any pages like this, we would recommend using multiple sample URLs so it has the best chance of actually extracting and finding the data for you. So if you give it 2 or 3, it will download 2 or 3 test fixtures, and then the agent can run against those to make sure that the output that is expected matches what the output from the actual passing code is written. Now I'm going to say generate fixtures and update code and expectations. You can, of course, break this out into certain steps if you want to, and that's the recommended way. I'm showing you how I do it, having done a lot of testing. So what it's going to do first is it's going to check the setup of your project. It's going to make sure that you have everything installed. I know we looked at it through the extension. button, but we're going to make sure here that it's got everything working. So it's going to check my Scrapy Project status, and it's going to check that the item's all in the right place. I've already done this in my demo project. I wasn't going to show you how to set up a Scrapy project because I'm sure you're all aware how to do so. We can see here it's skipping through certain steps. So if you don't type in the whole prompt like I did, it will say, do you want to carry on each time? But I said create fixtures and generate, et cetera, because I wanted to go through it itself and do it all automatically without my intervention every time. So if I come over here now, we can see that we have a fixtures folder that's been created, and this is for the page. And what's in here is the HTML from the page. It's downloaded this using my Scrapy settings. So however you use Scrapy to download and extract the data, it's going to use those settings to generate these fixtures. So if you have your anti-ban and everything sorted already, it's just going to do that, and it's going to work that way. But if Scrapy is not going to be able to see the page anyway without some extra intervention, if you don't do anything here, this will fail, and the process will stop. Where have we got to? So it's carrying on. OK, cool. So it's done the whole process. So let's have a quick check through of what we've got here, and I'll explain the tools. So we've got create the empty page object, which is over here. I'll show you that in just a second. Test fixtures, which we covered. And it's run the tooling from the MCP server. This is the one that has our instructions in it. And this says, you can see here, it doesn't modify files. It returns to the model, the agent, hey, this is what you need to do now. It doesn't do anything itself. It returns, do this, and it gives you the, here we can extracted the data that we're after. So if I was to go now to, let's keep those, the output.json, this is my expected output matching my schema from my item that we would expect to see. This is worth checking, although having said that, every time I've done this and I've iterated through this workflow hundreds of times now, it's been pretty accurate every time. So we've not had to worry too much about that. But this is a fairly straightforward schema. If yours is more complicated or if yours is more in detail, it's worth checking to make sure, because this is going to be used to test against. I come to the page object. I will show you what it's created here. Now, I didn't show you it as a blank file, but what happens through that setup process is it creates this without any selectors or anything like that, and just has the blank fields in there. And then it goes through and updates them. So this has all been generated automatically. I haven't had to look at the website other than get a URL and know what the sort of page is that I'm after. I haven't had to do any inspect element or check anything like that. It's given me all of this here. So let's run the test now. These look pretty good to me, and see how we get on. So we down here, allow to run the test, and we can see that we have all passes. Now, obviously, I'm doing this live. I knew this was going to happen, right? I knew it was going to be like this. But there are some cases that I've had where one of these tests would fail. What happens when one of the tests fails is that the agent will automatically pick it up, and it will read it, and it will go, there's an issue with this field. What we had it doing initially was iterating over it to try and find an answer, to find the right selector, to make sure the output matched the expected output from the JSON file. However, as I said at the beginning, we found that one of the issues with AI generating code like this is it just keeps on iterating and iterating and iterating, and it just makes a massive mess. So what we decided to do was to basically limit how many goes it gets at trying to work it out. So if you have fails in your tests here, it will try again to get the right selector, or the right output, rather. Because sometimes the selector will be right, but maybe there's a differentiation in the text, the way that it's got it. It will try, I think, once or twice extra. I'm not exactly sure how many times. If it fails, the AI will stop, and it will come into the chat, and it will say to you, I can't do this one's failing, you need to go and sort it out. I think that's a really good compromise and a really good way of managing it, because we don't want that extra iteration. We want to be able to be in control of our code. And it's that control as to why we ended up building a tool like this that works in your IDE, because we want to stay in our IDE. We don't want to go anywhere else or have to mess around with other things. So I've got full test passing here. So I'm going to move on, because we don't want to just scrape one page. We want to do multiple ones. One thing I am going to change is that this is our URL matching for the product pages. And I found that sometimes it doesn't pick up this extra part of the URL because this is going to determine when the Scrapy request comes through, which page object gets used. So I'm just going to update that myself here. Let's go ahead and create another one. We need to because we want to iterate through all pages. I'd highly recommend creating a new chat when you start to generate a new page object, just for context issues. So I'm going to do that here. And we'll do the same thing. We'll do our list item using the sample URL. Use my test site. Oh, can't type. Let's do that again. And again, I'm going to do generate fixtures and update code and expectations. The AI will know what I mean. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to let it zip through. It's going to do exactly the same. It's going to check the status of the project again, because we've created a new context. That should take just a second or so. And it's going to take my new URL, run it through Scrapy, get a new fixture, and follow the process. Now, when you're generating multiple page objects, they will be organized by domain. Okay, it seems to have stopped. We'll give that just a second, and I might need to redo that. So they're organized by domain. So what we can do here is we can have clear separation of multiple spiders and multiple domains that we're scraping. Now, if they're following the same schema, of course. Now, you can have multiple items as well. In my testing so far, I've only done a single kind of like item style one. I'm going to do that again. Let's go back. I'll get my URL properly. See if Gemini's going to play with me this time. Cool. There we go. So as I was saying, it's going to create the new page object in the same file. I'm going to split them out. Now, when you have multiple page objects from multiple sites, all that sort of stuff, we can come over to the extension, and over here it's going to include the details of each one. So if I zoom in here, we can see that from the side panel we have easy access. Okay, it's asking me for confirmation. Yes. We have easy access to the fields that are in this page object, and if I had more space on the screen, you can see I could click on these and it would take me to them. And it will also show you the test fixtures, which you can run from here, so you can easily test your project as you need to. So that's one way the UI is going to help you out. I'm just going to go yes again and follow through. Zoom out a little bit so we can see. So if we look at our page object, in our new fixtures, okay, it hasn't actually created the page object for some reason. It's probably going to figure that out in a second and change that. We do have our new fixtures. We have our new HTML. And the output is expected, matches the list item that we created. We want to loop through all the pages, that usual stuff. So we can see here it's running the MCP server again through the MCP. It's going to zip through this and figure out what it needs to do. Should only take a second. Just going to double check that my spider is created and looks right whilst I'm waiting for this. For my items. Yeah, I think that's good. We should yield the item here. I'm going to let it do what it needs to. Just going to check through the files. So far, I guess we've been going for, I don't know, how long have I been doing this? Maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that. And I've generated pretty much a simple spider without having to look through any HTML or anything like that. And with the tests, I can make sure that it all works. So I want to just finish off and just make sure that the tests for this one pass, and then move on, run the spider. It's not generating the, there we go. I'm just going to start doing it now. Okay. It's not been happy with this for some reason. I'm going to blame Gemini. There it is. There's this page. Cool. Sure. Okay, so we do have some failed tests, so something has gone wrong here. Let's have a look. Yeah. So it's not happy. This is not exactly, I mean, it doesn't, yeah, got none. So I'm going to let it iterate over this again, and it's going to try and figure out what's going on here. That's interesting. Okay. What I'm going to do is, because this obviously worked flawlessly for me every time this morning, but there's gone something wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try running it, and we'll see what happens. So there is an error in this. I'm not going to sit here and start to debug these problems, because when I do that, I put my head down and don't say anything and go through a load of things we don't need to see. So I have had some issues with this. But this is still beta. We've only just come out of alpha into this now. And I assure you that the times I did it yesterday and this morning, it was fine. Anyway, they're going to lead me on to my next point, and the final point is, we are iterating on this, and we are developing this constantly. I've been in contact with the engineers that have been building this, and I know the roadmap, and I can see the vision, and Ian's going to speak to that in just a minute. But for what I would say is that we really think that this is a positive thing that's going to happen. We're going to use this ourselves. I've been using it a lot, and we want to get it into your hands, which is why we are showcasing it now, and we'll be creating content on it, documentation. So we would love it if you guys would download it, give it a go, and give us your feedback. There's on the actual page itself, there's a GitHub issues link which you can fill out. Or if you want to come and talk to me directly, I'm more than happy to hear what you've got to say, and we can feedback that way. All in all, I think this has been a very positive experience, and it's something that we're committed to working on. So yeah, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Ian now, who's going to talk through a little bit more about the reasoning and everything like that as to what is all going on here. So I'm going to hand over to Ian. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. As he described, I'd like to give a bit more context of what we're trying to do here, what our direction of travel is, and what is our roadmap. And specifically, what we're looking to support here is the use of AI for production web data, quite specifically. What do I mean by production web data? I mean high scale. So the people in this room are typically owning use cases where web data is being used to power products and services. And in this room, we're typically talking millions of records, tens of millions of records. And that creates its own requirements for a successful solution. And when I talk to people about what are the needs of a successful solution, this is the kind of feedback I get. That quality has to be deterministic. That something where an LLM is taking its best guess at runtime, that we might get different results on different pages or different days, is problematic when we have tens of millions of records. That a better solution is one where if it does not find the right field, it breaks cleanly, we see that break, we can fix it. It's a piece of feedback I get given. Another one, as John touched on, is it's got to work with multiple anti-ban vendors. I've talked about solutions in the past that are tightly bound to our own Zeit API, and people have given me feedback to say, if this isn't compatible with my own waterfall mechanism for more than one anti-ban solution, I can only use this for prototypes. And I get that. And so this is a need that we're thinking about as we reflect on these solutions. That it's got to be scalable, it's got to be deterministic. Is this resonating? These are the qualities that we're looking at. And I think what this points to is something of a split in the solution spaces between solutions that are no code, that are targeted on use cases around empowering the end user. And what I see in my LinkedIn feed are examples like, as a marketing professional, now I can gather 5,000 sales leads for a campaign in 2 hours, and I don't need an engineer. And that would not have been possible a few years ago. And no-code solutions are excelling at this space, at empowering the end user. But that's a different kind of goal to the kind of qualities I described on that previous slide, where the ease of use is not the number one priority. There are other items that are the number one priority. And so what we're seeing is in these kind of high-scale production use cases, code is still the best solution. And so if we're asking ourselves, how can we accelerate code for web scraping with AI, that's really a nuance within the bigger question of AI for software engineering. This is Andrej Karpathy. He's a chief data scientist at Tesla, or was. He was the person who coined the expression vibe coding. And he's speaking in June of this year at the Y Combinator conference. And he's describing generative coding as a third generation of software engineering, where the second was deep learning. And he describes that each generation is eating into the domain space of previous generations. But as he observes, large language models have flaws. They have imperfections. And for us to get the best out of their potential, as he describes, we need to create workflows that creates governance and oversight around the freedom that we give them in order that we can get the best out of them. And so he sees this challenge as a solution design problem. And for him, a successful solution design is what he calls partial autonomy apps. And he gives examples of partial autonomy, like Tesla cars, or Perplexity, or Cursor. And these are solutions that have UIs that offer oversight, where we can see what's happening in the automation. We can quickly verify whether it is what we want or if it is not. We can intervene quickly and give it guidance to get it back on the right path. That successful solutions give us choice-making over the level of agency that we want to give the solution for the task in hand. And Perplexity very much has that spectrum. It's got a YOLO mode. Not the right way around, that way around. It's got a YOLO mode where you can say, accept everything. And if you're building a Saturday morning prototype, yeah, you can say, have at it. Make a big cup of coffee, see how it gets on, what's it made? That's not the right level of agency for production level code, where you'd want to pull that back. And again, in Perplexity, that's then a different interface. Control K, I want to change that line of code, let's test it, let's go. So it gives you that level of choice making according to the task in hand. And so yeah, one of these dimensions is what is the task? What is the level of risk? Is it low risk? I can give this a lot more freedom. Is it a prototype? Do I want to vibe code this? Or is it a higher level of risk? This is a production system. I want this under a tighter leash. But another dimension is the maturity of the solution. As these solutions mature, at large, the quality of the models, but also the maturity for specific use cases, we can give them more agency. We establish more trust, we can give them more freedom, therefore we can achieve more productivity. But perhaps a third dimension is developing our own behaviors around these technologies, including clickers. This is Dora. This is the DevOps Research and Analysis publication from Google. It's a big publication, it's worth reading. It talks about many examples of engineering practices that correlate with effective use of AI. This is just 2 examples, where they talk about teams that make effective use of mature version control, they're comfortable doing rollbacks, are comfortable taking more risk and being more experimental. If they work in smaller batches, if they can control the scope. We heard from John an example as he was setting up the code, that by using page objects, we create structures that the AI is more able to find and work with more easily. So we have to develop our own behaviors and optimize our own behaviors as engineers around these tools to get the best out of them. But if these are 3 dimensions for extending that boundary of agency within AI-based software engineering, how does this apply to web data? What does partial autonomy look like for production web data at scale? And what we feel strongly about at Zeit is that what we should not be doing is creating isolated islands of functionality that take people away from this momentum of AI software engineering. We feel we should be stepping towards it and looking to fill the gaps. And understanding what are the most effective, most competent tools for AI-based software engineering, and understanding where do they have gaps and immaturities for the specific task of web scraping and filling those gaps so that we can unblock their use. And that will be a continuous journey. I think it is difficult for any of us to guess what the tool set will be in 3 years' time, what the day-to-day behaviors of engineers will be in 3 years' time. And I think the best thing is for all of us to keep track of that journey and continue to assess these technologies and understand what they need to be and to do in order to support our use case of web scraping and what gaps we need to fill. And that's something that we are committed to at Zeit, is keep an eye on the progression of these technologies and these routines and see where the gaps in maturity are for web scraping so that we can fill them. So these are not separate technologies, they're extensions, they're plugins, they're add-ons. So you can keep your own first choice tech stack as that tech stack evolves. We're early in this journey. Our top focus right now is maturity. We've seen that. John's demo is exciting, it's quick, and he's hit a challenge, and we're working through that. And we'll work through the edge cases in order that you can build your trust in this solution. We'll extend it to more of the first choice tech stack. So right now, it's code setups in VS Code. And we'll look at other IDEs. We'll probably look at Windsurf and Cursor first because they're based upon the same code base as VS Code. We'll look at others beyond that like PyCharm. But then, yes, we'll get to monitoring and maintenance. This is something we're looking at very closely with Suzanne's professional services team. And that's an area where, again, we ourselves need to look at that sliding scale of choice making, of agency, from assistant to agent. Because if we've now got an agent where we're monitoring the code, and when it breaks, it goes in and regenerates the code for the broken page object, what should we do with that regenerated code? Should we push it straight to production and rely on monitors to see if that's been successful? Should we give the engineer the choice and give them a pull request and say, hey, you can monitor this before you choose to put this live? We think we should give people the choice because it may be from site to site, there are varying levels of confidence and trust. As an engineer, I may say, for this site, the last 5 pull requests have been clean. I'm happy to put this live. I've got monitors in place. I can roll back if I have to. If this breaks over the weekend, just do it. I want to come in on Monday morning and have a working spider. But we'll give people the choices around this so that trust can be established and you can set that level according to the level of confidence that you have. Suzanne described that we're using this in our own professional services team and it's doubling productivity. We're at around 2.5x at the moment. So this is being used on setups. It's largely around the parsing code. We'll extend that to the navigation code. But then, yes, the next big milestone that we're unpacking right now is the maintenance. And so we can get from 2.5x to 3x to 4x and so on. That we can establish the increasing maturity of the solution so that we can give this more agency and so we can increase that level of productivity. This went live. Suzanne and John described as alpha 6 weeks ago. We've got about 500 active users now. Went into beta on Monday. It's free of charge. Please download this and put this to the test. Tell us where we need to extend this maturity so that you can have confidence in this solution and make more use of it. Tell us where there are gaps in your first choice tech stack that we need to fill to unblock the use of those tools for web scraping so that we can extend this. Thank you.